For this extraordinary conversation. Following a period of general speeches, at about 11, the Chamber will take up consideration of the nomination of attorney Jennifer Dorsey to be a U.S. District Court judge in Nevada. Votes on her nomination scheduled for noon Eastern. Members will then recess from 12:30 to 2:15 for their weekly party lunches. Also on the agenda this week, legislation to reverse the doubling of interest rates on federal subsidized student loans that took effect on July 1st. Also possible work on 2014 federal spending bills. And now, live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Let us pray. Lord God Almighty, recreate our hearts to love you above all. Rule our lives, creating in us a passion to do your will. Give our lawmakers renewed strength and resilience to honor you in their work. May they do their best today as an expression of love and gratitude to you. Lord, replace weariness with well-being, anxiety with assurance, and caution with courage. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., July 9, 2013. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Tammy Baldwin, a senator from the state of Wisconsin, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Patrick J. Leahy, President.
Madam President.
The Majority Leader.
I move to proceed to calendar number 124, student loan.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 124, S-1238, a bill to amend the Higher Education Act of 1965 to extend the current reduced interest rate on undergraduate federal direct Stafford loans for 1 year and so forth and further purposes.
Madam President, following my remarks and those of my Republican counterpart, the time until 11 will be equally divided and controlled, with majority controlling the first half, Republicans the final half. At 11, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the nomination of Jennifer Dorsey. At noon, there will be a roll call vote on confirmation of the Dorsey nomination. I would also add that the chairman of the Judiciary Committee has asked that we hold that vote open until 12:30 today because they're having a confirmation hearing on the new director of the FBI, Mr. Comey. So we will do that. So the vote will end at 12:30 rather than 12:15 or 12:20. Following that vote, the Senate will recess from 12:30 until 2:15 for our weekly caucus meetings. Madam President, in America, this great country of ours, quality education is the surest path to the American dream. Now, when I was a boy, we always looked at that American dream as getting a college education, which, from where I came, didn't happen very often. But now that American dream is more than just getting an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. It involves many other occupations, all the things available in healthcare now, nursing, nurses' assistants, all the technicians, the people who do physical therapy, not physical therapists, but people who help doctors do what they need to. We have programs, you can become a physician's assistant, many programs that are important to making the fulfillment of that American dream. all kinds of different programs for computer training, separate and apart from getting a bachelor's degree. Those programs are extremely important, and the reason that they're important is we as Americans have decided that with the cost of education skyrocketing as it is, students should get some help, whether they're seeking a degree in engineering or getting a program that they can begin some computer training to have a job that they want for the rest of their lives. But, Madam President, college has never been more expensive and further out of reach for American families. That's why it's critical we keep interest rates low on federal student loans so more promising students can realize their dream of an education. Last month, Republicans rejected Democrats' plan to freeze student loan interest rates at current levels for 2 years without adding a penny to the deficit. Because of this obstruction, loan rates doubled on July 1st, piling thousands of dollars more on debt that more than 7 million students owe. Republicans are instead pushing a plan to balance the budget really on the backs of struggling students. But if either the legislation passed by House Republicans or the plan proposed by Senate Republicans becomes law, student loan rates would more than double over the next few years as interest rates increase. The Speaker, Speaker Boehner, says the House has acted and now the ball's in the Senate's court. We talked about that yesterday, Madam President. What is he talking about? They've acted, now we should act. I guess we could talk about what they didn't do last year on the Farm Bill. I guess we could talk about what they didn't do last year on post office. I guess we could talk about what they haven't done this year on the Farm Bill. We could talk about what they haven't done that is so devastating to small business around America. That is, having people who are online who don't build a single building, rent a single building, they get a different rate of return than do those brick and mortar buildings. They do that because they don't have to pay sales tax. Now, we could talk about why the Speaker is refusing to take up something that's meaningful. You know, as I say about this student loan thing, I've said this, I just had a meeting that ended a few minutes ago. If you can explain to me why these proposals that the Republicans have are better than just having the rates double, please explain that to me. But they go into all these gyrations about whether it's a T-bill that's overnight T-bill or 30 days or 6 months or all this complicated stuff. And it's factual. I met with someone from the White House. And I said, okay, tell me what happens in 3 years. Oh, well, the rates would be above 6.8%. That's a problem. If someone can show me how all these programs that they're coming up with is better than just letting things double, tell me. We have a better proposal. We have a better proposal. Instead of pushing a plan to balance the budget on the backs of struggling students, I think we should support a plan that would be better for students, not worse for students. I repeat, we can't support a plan that would be worse for students than doing nothing at all. We have to take action. The rising price of higher education means too many young people are deferring higher education. I hear all the stories, Madam President. Well, education used to be cheaper. Well, because of what's happened here in Washington with the obstruction we've had to help people, there's been less support of higher education from the states. Tuition costs have risen significantly because of that. Students need help. We have to take action. The rising price of higher education means too many young people are deferring higher education and has saddled many who do get a degree with unsustainable debt. Debt that caused them to delay buying their first home or even having children or give up on starting a business. Americans have more than $1 trillion in student loan debt. And the average graduate owes more than $25,000. In fact, Americans have more student loan debt than credit card debt. They simply can't afford to pile on even more. We're going to continue to fight to keep student loan rates low and hold back the rising price of education. Tomorrow, the Senate will vote on whether to even begin debate on our plan to keep loan rates low for an additional year. I really admire the work done by Senator Stabenow, chairman of the Agriculture Committee, but she is someone who is very effective in conveying a message, and she has led the message for we Democrats as to why we shouldn't let these rates double. And she'll continue to do that. Now, we, as I indicated earlier, we made a proposal to keep rates where they are for 2 years. We've made changes to our proposal in an effort to meet Republicans in the middle while protecting students. Our plan shortens extension from 2 years to 1 year, and it doesn't add a penny to the debt. I spoke to the chairman of the Finance Committee today. I said, Max, explain how we're paying for this. It was so simple. It's inherited IRAs that people would pay after 5 years. They wouldn't get the tax deduction after 5 years. What our program does, it closes this obscure tax loophole that allows a few very, very wealthy individuals to avoid paying taxes on inherited retirement accounts. That's why Senator Baucus came up with this as a pay-for. So I hope Senate Republicans won't block a second common-sense plan in investing in our economy by keeping college affordable. Now, we reduced it for a year from 2 years because it would be great if we had a long-term solution to this, Madam President. But we can't do something that hurts students very quickly. Some have said, well, it's going to be for a year or two. It'll be lower interest rates. Yeah, but after that, it's Katie bar the door. We all know interest rates are going to go up. On another topic, before the lunch, I've indicated that we'll consider the nomination of Jennifer Dorsey, but a United States District Judge for the District of Nevada. She'll be a valuable addition to the federal court system. She's a Las Vegas native. Her father was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, and after Vietnam decided that's where he wanted to make his home, and he started his family there. Ms. Dorsey graduated from Chaparral High School and graduated cum laude from the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. She was also the first member of her family to graduate from college. She served as a congressional intern for my friend and former colleague, Richard Bryan. She attended Pepperdine University Law School, where she's a member of the Law Review. After graduation, she turned to Las Vegas and excelled, first an associate, and now as a partner at the firm Kemp, Jones & Coulthard. Long time, very proud Nevada law firm. She's the first and only female partner in that firm. She specializes in civil litigation, complex commercial disputes, appeals, and class actions. I'm very impressed with her dedication to the state of Nevada, her community, and the legal profession. She'll make an outstanding federal judge for Nevada. I look forward to her confirmation.
Madam President.
The Republican leader.
Over the years, we've seen repeated instances of indifference to the rule of law on the part of this administration. It's a consistent and worrisome pattern. Most recent example, of course, was just last week's announcement that the President had simply decided not to enforce a major piece of his health care law. That is, until after the midterm election. What the President was saying, in effect, was that if he doesn't want to implement the law he's signed, he doesn't have to. If he doesn't want to implement the law he's signed, he doesn't have to. Now, I agree, it's a terrible law. I understand why people harmed by it would want it changed. In fact, I think we ought to repeal it altogether and opt instead for real reforms that would actually lower costs. But the fact is, for now at least, it is the law. And it's the President's constitutional duty to enforce the law. Yet instead of fulfilling this basic duty of his office, the President seems to believe he gets to decide who is subject to the law. He gets to decide who's subject to the law and who gets a pass. So last week, businesses had their Obamacare sentences delayed. Maybe next week, it'll be some other group. But it's his call. He'll decide what the law is. He did it with immigration. He did it with welfare work requirements. And he did it with the NLRB when he took it upon himself to tell another branch of government when it was in recess. And now he's doing it again with his own signature health care law. Imagine that the current occupant of the White House was not President Obama, but a Republican. Just imagine that. Pretend that this Republican had come to office promising an era of inclusion and accountability. But as the years wore on, he simply had grown tired of the democratic process. Imagine that this president, despite securing confirmation for nearly every nominee he submitted, couldn't understand why the elected Senate didn't simply rush them all through even quicker. He couldn't understand why senators insisted on fulfilling their constitutional obligations to scrutinize each nominee. Just visualize for a moment that this president decided to urge members of his party to break the rules of the Senate so that he could appoint whomever he wanted, regardless of checks and balances. Imagine the outrage in the media, online, and especially on the other side of the aisle. They'd claim the president was a dictator. They'd say he was ripping the Constitution to shreds. Basically, everything they said for so many years about President Bush. But of course, President Obama isn't a Republican. And so Washington Democrats seem just fine with it. In fact, it appears they're even ready to help this president, actually help him in his partisan power grab. Now, I know Washington Democrats are getting a lot of pressure from big labor bosses and from other far-left elements of their base to do this. These folks have told Democrats it's time to pay up. And they don't have much time for things like the democratic process or the rule of law. They've raised a ton of money for Democrats, and now they want the special interest treatment they believe is owed to them. That's why we see the other side cooking up phony nomination fights. Phony nomination fights, because they don't want to go, they're cooking up a phony nomination fight because they want to go nuclear, but they know the facts simply aren't on their side to justify doing so. They know their core argument that President Obama's nominees are being treated less fairly than those of President Bush is essentially at odds with reality. It's a complete fiction. They've gotten burned by the fact checkers already. President Obama's nominees for Secretary of Transportation and Energy unanimously confirmed. Secretary of State confirmed. Treasury confirmed. Interior, Defense, Commerce, check, check, check. Already in this Congress, the Senate has approved 27 of President Obama's lifetime appointments. That compares to just 10 at a comparable period in President Bush's second term. And by the way, my party controlled the Senate. At this point in President Bush's second term, he got 10. President Obama has 27. In other words, President Obama has just settled back into office, and already he's secured nearly three times more comparable judicial confirmations. Look, to justify doing something as extreme as the left wants, you'd better be prepared to make a rock-solid case. And this is the best they can come up with? That we need to change the rules of the Senate because big labor bosses say so? That the left should be allowed to fundamentally change our democracy because the president is only getting nearly everything he wants? Nearly everything he wants, rather than everything he wants at the exact moment he wants it? Let's get real here. This is not how a democracy functions. If this were a Republican president and the shoe were on the other foot, does anyone seriously believe that Washington Democrats would be going along with something so preposterous? Utterly preposterous? Of course not. Remember, the current majority leader once said the nuclear option would, quote, ruin our country. That was said by the fellow who sits right over here, the current majority leader of the Senate. And a former senator from Illinois named Obama said that if the Senate broke the rules to change the rules, the fighting, the bitterness, and the gridlock would only get worse. Boy, he was right about that. So what I'm saying to President Obama and his friends on the far left is this. The facts show you're getting treated pretty darn well on nominations as it is. But if you'd like more confirmed, if, for instance, you want the Senate to confirm your nominees to the NLRB, then don't send us nominations that have already been declared illegal by the courts. Don't send us nominees that have already been declared illegal by the courts. We've already said that's not going to happen. You know you can't look Americans in the eye and say you'd vote for such a thing if you were in the minority. So don't expect us to. But if you send us fresh picks, we'll happily give them a fair hearing, just as we've been doing all along with all the rest of the President's nominees. Almost all of them have been confirmed. Most of them have been confirmed almost unanimously. Because we, in America, know that majorities of either party will never get absolutely everything they want. That push and pull is a hallmark of a healthy democracy. And it's important to remember one day, maybe not in the too distant future, when our friends in the majority invariably return to the minority, I suspect my Democratic friends will thank us for standing up for those democratic rights. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the time until 11 a.m. will be equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each, with the majority controlling the first half.
Madam President.
The senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise today because tomorrow in the Senate chamber we will vote on whether or not to let student interest rates double from 3.4% to 6.8%. This should not be controversial. This should have been done before July 1. Now we're trying to retroactively fix this. We have attempted to bring this to the floor and vote on it before. On a number of occasions, we've seen a Republican filibuster blocking us from doing that. This week, I'm hopeful we can get the necessary votes, get a bipartisan vote to overcome the filibuster and be able to send a very strong message to students across the country that we understand that this is a huge issue for them and their families, a huge cost, and raising the rates will only be another barrier to creating opportunity for students in the future and, frankly, having a middle class in this country. What is happening to students and the debt involved is very, very serious and stopping many young people from being able to move ahead and be able to achieve their dreams. At a time when interest rates for everything else are at historic lows, everything else, why in the world would we double the interest rates for young people or older people going back to school who are trying to get an education and the work skills that they need? Why would we allow that when you can get a mortgage right now from 3.5%, 4%? You can get a car loan for about 4%. We go on and on. And here's the shocking thing. If the rates are doubled, if in fact what kicked in on July 1st is allowed to stand, it will mean a huge profit for the federal government, which also makes no sense. Some $50 billion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Why should the government of the United States of America profit off the backs of students who are struggling to get an education so that they can get ahead? We have a fundamental disagreement in this body. between the majority of Democrats and the majority of Republicans on that question. It's a fundamental difference about what we should pick as a priority for our country. And frankly, for nearly 300,000 students in Michigan who are going to be forced to pay an extra $1,000 on their loans this year, it makes no sense. You know, I remember growing up in a little town in northern Michigan, working hard, getting good grades in my small class of 93 people, being at the top of the class and wanting to go to college, and my dad got very ill. We couldn't afford, Madam President, for me to go to school. First one to get a college degree in my family. I went to school because of the value at that time by the state of Michigan and the federal government that kids like me, who didn't have a lot of money but had worked hard and had good grades, ought to have a shot. And I had a tuition and fee scholarship. And I was able to go to college. I put that scholarship together with working on campus, with student loans. I was able to get a bachelor's degree. I was able to go on and get a master's degree. Came out, had to pay off the student loans. But because some folks who didn't know this redhead, freckle-faced kid from Clare decided this is an important value for America. This is an important value for our state. I had a chance to work hard and follow the rules and make it. And who would have thought I'd have the opportunity to be here today? I want that opportunity for every young person in Michigan and every young person, every person going back to school in this country. Fundamentally, that's what this is about. It's not about numbers. It's not about numbers. It's about whether or not, when we see that we subsidize all kinds of things, banks and even the farmers that I fight for, we help them with their crop insurance, and we do all kinds of things where we subsidize rates or insurance to be able to do things because it's good for the economy. And why in the world would we walk away from that with students? The most basic set of values. Colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, well, let's do something where we peg a rate. You know, it's like credit loans, teaser rate. Sign up now, 0 interest or 3%. Let's put it there, and then over time it balloons like crazy and you're stuck. Those are the kinds of proposals we've gotten from the other side of the aisle. Sound good now, horrible later. I know a lot of folks that signed up for mortgages, variable rate mortgages and balloon mortgages, that ended up in the same situation. We're saying no. We want a fixed rate, we want it low, and we want to make sure students are placed as a priority. And so after all kinds of negotiations, we've said, okay, you don't want to continue the rate for 2 years. Let's do this. Let's continue it for 1 year at the low rate of 3.4%. And then let's all get together and figure out what to do about helping those with $1 trillion in debt right now. That's the interest, that's the student debt across this country. Help them figure out how to refinance at lower rates, and let's deal with the long-term costs. That's what we are trying to do. It doesn't make sense when student loan debt in this country is over $1 trillion, when students are already sacrificing and scraping together the money to get an education. It does not make sense to double the rates on those student loans. And so when we look at this, we are looking not only at today but over time. And every proposal that's been put forward, and a lot of folks working, I know that there's conversations going on that of folks that want to solve this problem, but all of them end up with the rates going up higher than even doubling the rates to 6.8. Why does that make any sense? Why would folks propose that? We have a fundamental difference in how we view this issue of the cost of college and whether or not there is a role for the federal government. Do we as a country have a stake in keeping costs as low as possible, interest rates as low as possible? I would argue, yes, we do. And if we want to stop subsidizing things, I think there's a whole long list of things we could stop subsidizing. We could stop subsidizing the top 5 wealthiest oil companies in the country who have more profits than anywhere in the world. We give them tax breaks and credits, and we could stop subsidizing them. We could stop the loopholes that are taking our jobs overseas. We could stop doing that. There's a lot of things we could stop that would save money. We should not put all of this on the backs of students and say somehow we should make a profit to pay down the debt on the backs of students when, in fact, there are so many other areas where we should be asking people to chip in a little bit more, not those that are already working hard to get a basic education. We know that we have to have a comprehensive approach, but until that work is done, we should keep interest rates low. We should keep them where they are, and then I have great confidence in Chairman Harkin and his committee and Senator Jack Reed, who has taken the lead on this so passionately. Senator Kay Hagan and Senator Reed are our leaders on the bill that we will be voting on tomorrow. Senator Warren, so many others. Senator Boxer, who I know has spoken out so many times, Senator Sanders, on and on, the presiding officer. We all care passionately about creating a long-term solution for students that keep costs low so we can keep dreams high and success high in achieving those dreams. I'd like to read just two of the many, many emails, thousands of emails that I've received. I want to thank so many for signing petitions and sharing their stories with us. And I would urge folks to get involved in the competition, or the conversation, I should say, by joining us on Twitter with the hashtag #Don'tDoubleMyRate. There's a lot of conversation going on, information that folks can find out about what we're doing. But I want to read just two emails from constituents of mine in Michigan. The first is Corey, a student at Central Michigan University, who sent me an email about how this would make it difficult for him to continue his education. And he wrote, "As one of the taxpayers that you represent, I'm asking you to please not allow my student loan rates to be doubled. I'm a hardworking and respectful student. I make all of my payments. I go to class. I do well. I work hard and am grateful for the chance to get a higher education. But if student loan rates go up, I will be left to make a decision whether or not school will be affordable." That story can be replicated all across Michigan and all across the country. Will young people be able to stay in school? Will they be able to come out of school and get the job they want versus aiming for a job that relates to their ability to pay back their student loans? All kinds of choices. For the first time, we're starting to learn that young people are making tough choices about whether they can buy a house when they get out of college. What other options will be available for them? He writes, "From the time we first start learning, we are encouraged to attend college and get a good job so that we can be a part of helping this country grow. I'm simply asking you to help continue to make this an affordable option for me and for many others like me." That's what the vote's about tomorrow. And then secondly, an email from Matthew in Royal Oak. "Students are not asking for a bailout like the one that Wall Street got." Let me say it again. Students are not asking for a bailout like the one that Wall Street got. Just an opportunity to obtain an affordable education so we can compete in the global economy. That's what this vote is about tomorrow. The Keep Student Loans Affordable Act simply says we're going to tackle this very serious issue for families across the country in two steps. Keep the interest rate low, keep it where it is for a year, and then make a commitment to work together to fix the larger issue of the cost of college going forward. I don't think there is a more important issue for the future, for maintaining or recreating a middle class in this country than making sure we can allow everyone who wants to go on to college and get the skills they need to be successful in tackling and meeting their dreams than to make sure that this is affordable, that college is affordable. And a big piece of that is what will be the interest rate on the loans that millions of students are taking out right now and counting on us to make sure they are affordable. So I'm going to now turn, I believe I have colleagues, I know that there are colleagues coming. Senator Sanders is coming, and so I will continue for a moment until he arrives. I don't want to interrupt his time, but let me say, Madam President, that tomorrow the question will be whether or not a filibuster continues on this issue. And I think folks probably scratch their heads. We had a majority of people that voted, all Democrats, before to continue the interest rates at the current level of 3.4%. Because of the nature of the Senate and how things work, if there is an objection, we have to go through this process to be able to overcome what is essentially a filibuster, and you have to get 60 votes. So tomorrow we're going to have to get 60 votes, which means that we need a handful of Republican colleagues to join with us to make a statement that we should continue interest rates at the low level while we work together in a bipartisan way to solve the long-term problem. And when I think about the fact that we have over $1 trillion in this country in student loan debt, which is more than credit cards, I was surprised to see that, frankly, that with all the credit card debt that we all have, over $1 trillion. We've got to help families tackle that. I'd like to see refinancing options when interest rates are so low, and many of those are at much higher interest rates. We need to tackle that. We need to tackle the overall costs of going to college and what's happening for low-income students as well as middle-income students. So there's a lot to get done, but it has to start by doing no harm. And that's the vote tomorrow. Do no harm. Let's make sure we at least keep the rates low now. We know that there's a philosophical difference about whether or not we should actually help subsidize student loans. I think of all the things that we could subsidize, to me, I'd start with education. I think that is incredibly important. And tomorrow, the question is, do we do no harm? Do we keep the interest rate where it is while we work out a long-term solution? And do we make a very strong statement that if we're going to set something as a priority for this country, if we're going to out-compete, out-educate in a global economy, it has to start with making sure education, advanced higher education, is affordable for everyone who wants to work hard and play by the rules and go to college. That's what the fight's about. That's what the vote is about tomorrow. I hope we will have an overwhelming bipartisan vote. If not, we're going to continue to do everything possible to tackle this issue because I think families across America are counting on us. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Vermont.
Madam President, over the July 4th recess, I had the opportunity to talk with a number of Vermont families about the crisis of student debt. And without exception, this is what they said. They said, please do not double the interest rates on subsidized Stafford loans from 3.4 to 6.8%. Please make college financing more affordable, not more expensive. Madam President, this is an issue which not only impacts millions of families, it impacts our entire future as a nation and our economy. Right now, working-class families all over this country are asking themselves a very simple question, and their kids are asking a question. Does it make sense for them to go $40,000, $50,000, or $100,000 in debt in order to get a college education? And what many of these young people and families are saying is, no, it doesn't make sense. So in a competitive global economy, what we are saying to families all over this country, we do not want your kids to get a college education. We don't want them to become doctors or nurses, business people, scientists, teachers. We don't want them to expand their intellectual capability and make us a competitive nation in this highly competitive global economy. Now, if that makes sense to somebody, it surely does not make sense to me. Madam President, the doubling of student loan interest only makes an existing crisis even worse. According to a report by the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, the total student loan debt in the United States now exceeds $1.1 trillion, which is nearly triple what it was in 2004. The average loan balance for American graduates has increased by 70% since 2004. Average student debt is near $27,000 in Vermont. It is even higher, over $28,000. Madam President, the burden of student loan debt is making it much harder for young people to get mortgages and buy homes. Home ownership rates for young adults are among the lowest in decades. Young people are putting off marriage and having children partly because of the burden of student debt. Madam President, over the last several months, I have asked Vermonters and people, in fact, all over the country to send me their experiences, to tell me what this crushing debt of student loans means to their lives. And we've received over 700 responses from all over America, not just Vermont, but from all over the country. What I'd like to do is very briefly read to you some of the responses that I received from the state of Vermont. Emily Decker from Colchester, Vermont writes, and I quote, "Watching the interest eat away my savings every month is hard to swallow, to the point where we are not saving any money because we put anything extra toward my loans so we can pay them back as soon as possible. This is putting our plans for having a family on hold because we want to have our finances in better order before doing so." In other words, Emily writes, her family, this is true all over the country, are hesitating having kids because they can't afford to do so at the current time. Andrea Kraft from Burlington, Vermont writes, quote, "I'm a 25-year-old full-time college student at Champlain College. I'm a single mother. I am already $20,000 in debt, and I still have one more year to go before I graduate. I am currently at an internship working part-time on top of school and parenting, but I often feel that I am not ever going to be able to get ahead and make it in spite of my advantages." End of quote. Allison LaFlamme from Johnson, Vermont writes, and I quote, "I cannot refinance my house because even though my cars, home, and credit cards are perfect on my credit score, our debt to income is too high because of our student loans." Melissa Weber from Rutland, Vermont writes, "I have found myself struggling to survive independently as a 25-year-old with a master's degree. Yes, I have achieved a degree of which I'm proud, but I have also accumulated an immense amount of debt that will likely haunt me for the majority of my life. As a result of my daunting loan payments, I find myself barely surviving on an income that should easily support a small family." Evan Champagne from St. Albans, Vermont writes, quote, "My wife and I both have $50,000 to $60,000 of loan debt each. We both have good jobs, but a large percentage of our income is used to pay back student loans. There are no interest consolidation options available. If there were, that would also help. The education process should be rewarding and create opportunities. For my wife and I, it did the opposite." Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that I be allowed to put into the congressional record stories from 54 Americans all over the country about the impact of student debt on their lives.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the American people want us to come together and solve this problem now, not make the situation worse. When you tell people all over this country who are struggling with these horrendous debts that the Stafford subsidized loan debt is going to double, and there are proposals out there that make a bad situation worse, they really respond in disbelief. They remember how in 2009, when Wall Street, because of their greed and illegal behavior, collapsed, we bailed them out. They understand that today we're providing large Wall Street institutions with interest rates of less than 1%. And what they are asking is, if you could bail Wall Street out, people whose greed caused the current recession, how come you can't protect working class and middle class families and enable their kids to get an affordable college education? Madam President, the Republicans in the House passed a proposal. Unfortunately, it is a proposal which makes a bad situation worse. Under the House Republicans' proposal, all student loans would have variable interest rates, exposing graduates to market conditions. Even though the House Republicans' proposal caps interest rates, the Congressional Research Service estimates that students who take out the maximum subsidized student loan amount will pay nearly $6,000 more over the life of that loan than they would if rates are kept where they are today. The so-called
majority time has expired.
I would ask for 30 seconds additional.
Without objection.
The so-called bipartisan student loan bill being discussed in the Senate would also be a terrible deal for students, especially in the coming years. It provides no cap to protect students for the first time in the history of the student loan program. If this proposal were to pass, according to CBO projections of interest rates, by 2018, student loans will go up significantly. Madam President, short term, we've got to keep student interest rates, loans at 3.4%. Long term, we need a national solution to make sure that college is affordable for all Americans. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President.
The senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, last week our nation celebrated America's Independence Day, and the Obama administration took advantage of the holiday to slip out a couple of announcements about its health care law. The first one came late one day as the media and most of the nation were distracted by their plans for the 4th of July. The administration finally had to admit to all of America that their health care law is unraveling before our eyes. Several months ago, Senator Baucus predicted that the law was headed for what he called a train wreck. And last week, we saw the train really go off the rails. What happened was that the Treasury Department put out a blog post written by an assistant secretary late in the day on July 2nd that said it would postpone the implementation of the employer mandate part of the health care law until 2015. Now, this was one of the signature parts of the President's health care law. Under the law, every employer with more than 50 people working 30 hours or more a month or 30 hours or more a week was going to have to offer expensive government-mandated health insurance. So now we have a one-year delay of this extremely unpopular and damaging Washington mandate. Anytime you see the Obama administration leak news like that, late in the day, right before a holiday, with the President out of the country, you can bet it's bad news for him and for them. Presidents don't delay things that are popular and that actually people want and like. So when you see them try to hide it in a blog post, that's another sign. So here's what the New York Times said, front page. Crucial mandate delayed a year for health law. Large companies won't need to offer plans until 2015. GOP seizes on shift. Washington Post ran a headline, page 1, health care rule is delayed a year. A setback for Obama law. A setback for Obama law. The Wall Street Journal said, health law penalties delayed. So the Obama administration has tried to hide its bad news, but it failed. It also tried to spin the collapse of one of the law's most important features as good news. But as we see it here, Washington Post, a setback for Obama law. The Treasury Department's blog post claimed that it was implementing the law, quote, in a careful, thoughtful manner. Well, if they were interested in careful and thoughtful, Washington Democrats never would have pushed through this reckless law in the first place, a law that many of them admit that they never even read. Using that much Washington spin when it tries to sneak out bad news is another surefire sign that the White House is trying to hide the train wreck. The President and his supporters have been bragging about this part of the law for years. Now, here they are, quietly dropping it for a year and pretending that things are going well for the law. Well, what does this announcement really mean? First of all, this is a clear admission that the President's health care law is unaffordable, unworkable, and unpopular. And second, it may be too late. Here's a headline from CNN Money yesterday. They wrote, for Fatburger and others, Obamacare delay came too late. The article says that for many small businesses, like fast food franchises, well, they have already begun adjusting to the law's burdensome requirements. One business owner told CNN that the delay won't help his employees. He said, quote, all it's doing is causing confusion, anxiety, and the workers are paying the price. The workers are paying the price. Now the mandate's a moving target, he said. It's very, very challenging. So for a lot of businesses, the adjustments that they had to make included cutting back workers' hours. So let's look at the latest unemployment numbers that were released last Friday. In June, the number of people working part-time, and these are people that actually want to work more, soared by over 300,000. There are now 8.2 million Americans working part-time jobs because their hours were cut back or because they couldn't find full-time work. Republicans have been warning that this would happen because of the Democrats' health care law, and that's exactly what's been happening for months now. The White House has admitted as much when it said that employers needed relief from the logistical mess that the law created. If the law is so bad for businesses that they can't handle it in 2014, well, I'll tell you, it's still going to be bad for them in 2015. If it's bad for employers, it's going to be bad for people, men and women on the street, the hard workers of America. Well, when do they get relief? Will the administration now postpone the requirements that every man, woman, and child in America has to buy expensive government-mandated insurance? Well, I hope they do. You can bet that labor unions and other special interest groups are going to step up their lobbying to postpone the parts of the law that hurt them. Even the state of Massachusetts, Madam President, the state of Massachusetts is asking for a waiver from portions of the law. Let me be clear. I think it's a good thing for employers that they won't have to face this job-killing mandate next year. But why should they have to face it at all? Is the Obama administration finally seeing the light on what a disaster it will be to implement? Or is it just another gimmick? Well, like Ronald Reagan once said, they only come around on your side when they want to get their hands on your wallet. This one-year postponement is not a real solution. It's not designed to help job creators or taxpayers. It's designed to delay the train wreck until after the 2014 elections. This one-year postponement, in my opinion, is a cynical political ploy to try to fool the voters one more time. Now, don't just take my word for it, Madam President, because CNBC asked Peter Orszag about it the other day. Now, people know he headed President Obama's Office of Management and Budget in the President's first term. He was a big proponent and supporter of the law. He told CNBC that White House officials, quote, by definition, he said, by definition, thought that delaying the employer mandate would help them politically, quote, or they wouldn't have done it. By definition, therefore this, or they think it will help them, or they wouldn't have done it. If they didn't expect it to help them politically, they wouldn't have done it. It's an incredible admission by a former member of the Obama administration, his inside team. Just because the President thinks it's good for him politically doesn't mean it's good for the country. On Friday, the Obama administration also tried to sneak out another admission that its health care law isn't working. Remember, even though employers have another year before their mandate kicks in, all the people still have to buy expensive Washington-approved insurance, Washington-mandated insurance, and they have to do that by this upcoming January 1st. Well, to try to hide some of the costs, taxpayers are going to subsidize the higher premiums some people have to pay. In the Wall Street Journal just last Monday, insurance costs set for a jolt for the healthy. For the healthy, rates could soar under new law. Insurance costs set for a jolt. So to try to hide some of the costs, taxpayers are going to subsidize, but the prices are going to go up so high, subsidies may cover some, but not all. If someone wanted the subsidy, the government was going to have to, of course, verify that those people deserved the subsidy. Well, Not anymore, because now under the administration's new policy, buried away in 606 pages of regulations on Friday, he said nobody's going to check those answers. In an editorial yesterday, the Wall Street Journal called these Obamacare's liar subsidies. The paper agreed that managing the laws, rules, and regulations was complicated. Yet, the editors of the Wall Street Journal wrote, this is the system Democrats installed when they passed the law, which is not supposed to be optional due to administrative incompetence. Administrative incompetence is exactly what this is. It is also a recipe for rampant waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's an abuse in taxpayer subsidies. Now, I've criticized the complicated process the administration was setting up to verify people's subsidy applications. That's because I think it's a tremendous example of government overreach, and because Washington bureaucrats at the IRS and other agencies have shown that they can't be trusted with that kind of information. So the solution now apparently is to scrap the verification system. We should be cutting the cost of insurance. That's what people wanted. That's why we had health care reform, to get down the cost of care, not driving up the cost, giving subsidies to select few people and giving Washington more power to watch over the whole system. The American people don't need to put off the wreck until the train goes around one more bend. They want to stop the train wreck from happening at all. The American people want more than a temporary delay of one part of this terrible health care law. They want a permanent repeal of the whole thing. Now that the Obama administration has admitted its law is too complicated and would have too many negative side effects, it's time for it to set aside the political games and do what's best for the country, Madam President. It's time to repeal this bad law and replace it with health care reform that will work. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Madam President.
The senator from Tennessee.
I ask to vitiate the quorum.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I see the senator from Washington. Would she like to go ahead? Okay. Thank you, Madam President. I'll take 5 or 6 minutes if that's appropriate. Madam President, I come to the floor to ask my Democratic colleagues to take another look at the student loan issue that will be before us tomorrow. We're playing with real lives here. These are about 10 or 11 million students who are going to college in the fall. They'll be taking out 18 million loans for this year. Taxpayers will be loaning them over $100 billion. And the only proposal that we're going to be voting on tomorrow appears to be one that will leave about 6 million middle-income college students swinging in the wind, paying about twice as much in interest rates as they should be paying. And at the same time, we have a proposal that is based upon a recommendation by President Obama that is like legislation already passed by the Republican House of Representatives, that is supported by an independent and 2 Democratic senators and 3 Republican senators, that would lower student loan interest rates on every single one of the 18 million new loans that would be taken out next year, and cut nearly in half the interest rates on loans for undergraduate students, which are 2/3 of the loan. So, Mr. President, I ask the question, why would we do a 1-year political fix that only helps 40% of the students when we have before us a bipartisan proposal that is close to the idea of the President and the House that would help every single student? And especially why would we do that when we leave middle-income students twisting in the wind, paying over 10 years hundreds of millions of dollars more in interest rate than they should be paying? The student loan issue is becoming like what we call the doc fix, where Congress, for political reasons, every year rushes around and makes a temporary patch. There's no need to do that here. No need whatsoever. So I would ask my friends on the Democratic side to look at what the President's proposed and the reasoning behind it. It was in his budget. Look at what the House of Representatives has done. They've actually passed a bill that lowers rates, and then look at the proposal by Senator Manchin, Senator Carper, Senator King, Senator Burr, Senator Coburn, and me on this side. What our proposal would do is set the rates on a long-term solution where a student could come in this year, and if you're an undergraduate student at the University of Tennessee, instead of your rate being 6.8%, it would be 3.66%. The Democratic proposal, I repeat, does nothing for 6 million middle-income students who are going to be paying 6.8% when they should be paying, if they're undergraduates, 3.66% under our proposal. That's half as much. There's no need for that. So I think this is like many other situations. We have some misinformation going back and forth across the aisle, and I hope my friends on the other side will take a look at the Burr-Manchin proposal. The right thing for us to do is to say to these 10 million students, all of them, every single one of them, that when you go to take out your 18 million loans this year, you're going to be paying at a rate that is fair to taxpayers and fair to students. It's fair to taxpayers because it won't be costing the government any money, and it's fair to students because the government won't be making any money. It won't be reducing the deficit on the back of the students. That's the principle upon which we can agree. Fair to taxpayers, fair to students. Doesn't cost the taxpayers, doesn't balance the budget on the back of students. On that basis, we can say to students, take advantage of these low rates. You can get a 10-year loan if you're an undergraduate at 3.66%, and there's no need to pretend we're helping students when we only fix 40% of the students. These are the subsidized loans. These are the loans for low-income students who already get, for the most part, Pell Grants, who already have their interest paid while they're in school. That's a big subsidy, over about $50 billion in 10 years. And we leave the middle-income students, about 6 million of them, paying over the next 10 years hundreds of millions of dollars that they shouldn't be paying. I don't know why my friends on the other side want to leave the middle-income students of America twisting in the wind, paying higher interest rates than they should. So let's step back, look at the facts, look at the President's proposal, look at what the House passed, look at the bipartisan Burr-Manchin proposal, and I would respectfully urge the Majority Leader to allow us to vote on that, and urge my colleagues on the other side to coalesce around that idea, and let's say to the students of America that as the United States Senate, we know a good idea when we can see one, and the Burr-Manchin proposal is such an amendment. I thank the President. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations.